I founded Cook back in 1997, 24 years ago, so we've been going a long time. Whilst we've always believed in the principle that business should be used as a force for good, and we've been a B Corporation since 2012, I think it's fair to say that I certainly wouldn't see myself, certainly then and now, as an expert on all of this. We've always been very good at employing people. Workplace culture has always been very important, as has working within the community. However, the environment has always been a laggard in all of those sort of things. And so I think it's fair to say as a business, we're still playing a game of catch up. But over the last couple of years, that has accelerated a lot, getting myself up to speed about things. And I think from a personal perspective, I've got 4 kids who range in age from 5 to 16. So I feel quite a lot of pressure from them, which is good. And I think I've got to the point now where I think we all know at Cook that whilst the business is growing and that we are commercially successful, that it's simply not an option to be very commercially successful without the environmental credentials actually being commensurate with that commercial performance. So it's not good enough to be a great employer and doing lots of good stuff within the community if the environmental performance isn't good enough. And so that's what we're working on at the moment. Well, the first thing we've had to do is put together some very tight targets that provides a framing for everything else commercially. So we now have in place science-based targets working with the Carbon Trust that we put in place, whereby we've targeted in 2025 to be having the same amount of emissions as we had back in 2017, which is about 1,500 metric tons. So that's our first goal, to get there in 2025. So although the size of the business is basically will have more than doubled between 2017 and 2025, we want to have the same level of carbon emissions at that point. Then the target beyond that is 2030, where we want to have net zero in all our direct operations, despite, again, the business hopefully will be double the size by then. So it feels at this moment like a very, very big target. And yet at the same time, in terms of how it actually marries up with our commercial objectives, I think it comes down to hierarchy in terms of what's most important, because will it be okay for us as a business to double in size and then grow again if we're not meeting those targets? And I think the answer now is no, it's not okay. So it depends what you prioritize. And I think the wonderful thing from our perspective is that we remain privately owned. So we are free to make those decisions ourselves without having capital sitting behind us that demands a certain level of financial return. We can actually say, no, you know what, we're going to prioritize this as an objective over other things. And so we're lucky to have that sort of freedom. But it is going to mean, and we know it's going to mean, there's some tough decisions. There are 4 key components for us in terms of our carbon. There is the natural gas that we cook with. There is the refrigerants. Obviously, being a frozen food business, we use a lot of refrigerants in a food manufacturing business. The diesel that we use to get all our goods all over the place. We've run our own fleet of trucks. And there's obviously the electricity we use as well. So in terms of the solutions to those, with natural gas, we can buy green gas. That obviously is just a straightforward premium that we have to pay for it. Refrigerants is a complicated one because we are using quite a lot. We've got quite a lot of old kit in our kitchens. Our original kitchen opened in 2007. So we're using F-gases at the moment, which are horrible, absolutely horrible. They have an impact of every kilo of F-gas that goes into the atmosphere has a compound effect of 4,000. So the goal is to get the refrigeration running on CO2, because actually if there is then a leak, you are only releasing 1 kilo of CO2. So it doesn't have the multiplier effect. But to change that, and this is a good example of the challenges we face, because to change all the refrigeration over to CO2, that's about £1 million, straight away £1 million. Now that has zero commercial benefit. That is a straightforward investment in doing the right thing. The diesel is obviously a straightforward case of I say straightforward, but trying to get all the fleet into electric vehicles. But we've run quite a lot of big trucks. The technology isn't quite there yet, particularly for refrigerated trucks. We're watching it very closely. And again, it's a case of just making the money available as and when the tech comes. So those are the things we've got to do. We already buy renewables for all of our direct operations, which has obviously had a big impact. But those are the challenges we have to face. I think it's probably just worth saying we've budgeted, I know 3 million to get to hit our 2025 science-based targets. I know, having been doing this for a bit, that won't be enough, despite the fact I'm assured it is. It won't be. It was bound to cost more than that. So we have to balance, coming back to the question, our investment and what, frankly, the reduction in profit that we're prepared to suck up and what's appropriate in order to be able to hit this sort of target. It's very challenging. And I would also just say that whilst I think, you could say, well, to what degree are customers, how is the brand going to benefit from it? The honest answer is, I think in the short term, not much, because I just don't think people will change their purchasing decisions that much in the short term. However, for the long term, if you're going to run a brand, you've got to do it. You're not going to have a successful brand in 10 years' time, 15 years' time, 20 years' time, if you don't do this sort of thing. It's an absolutely fundamentally important part of investing for the future. And I think it's difficult for companies like ours, who've been around for a long time and have a load of infrastructure that's carbon heavy. And if you're running a newer business, the sooner you can hard bake this into your business model, the better. So you're not having to go through some of the pain that we're having to go through, because investors want this sort of stuff now, but bake it in soon. Once you set yourself an ambitious target, like we have with 2025 goals and 2030 goals, you necessarily have to completely rethink how the management works in order to be able to deliver that. So we've set up a decarbonisation group, which is completely cross-functional. So we have people from every part of the business. And our head of sustainability actually put it very nicely. He said, what you've got to do is you've got to make the people who are responsible for emitting the carbon responsible for solving the problem. So we have all of those people in the room. They're really clear. It's kind of, you are the problem. It's not personal, but it's like, you are responsible for the problem. You are responsible for sorting it out. And so at that group, and I go to it, my sister, who's the co-CEO with me, she goes to this group as well. We monitor the footprint on a month-by-month basis. We talk about technological progress that's been made, because one of the things we know is that whatever pathway we set ourselves now to 2025 and 2030, it won't be the pathway we take, because technology is moving all the time. So we talk about technology, what's coming up, what's happened, so that we're all sort of in the loop on it, and obviously then review the pathways accordingly. Now, a big part of that is we're putting together at the moment a shopping list of all the CapEx, capital items that we could buy, whether it's electric vans, the refrigeration I spoke about earlier. We've just put solar panels on our new kitchen that we built a year and a half ago in Sittingbourne. And there are going to be choices. So, for example, we might build a massive new warehouse soon. Now, we could spend £1 million on putting solar panels on the roof of that warehouse. Or do we spend £1 million on new refrigeration? And so there are always going to be more things to do than we can afford. And so it's important to have a big shopping list of things we could do and then select from that shopping list. So that is what that group does. It helps to determine, to what degree we invest in green gas, or we invest in electric vehicles or solar panels and all of that sort of stuff. So it's absolutely vital you have for us, you have a cross-functional group that's taking proper ownership of this. And I think vital that you have presence at CEO board level at that meeting. This is not a problem that can be delegated further down the management chain. It has to be taken on at that sort of level. Everyone needs to see that we are completely committed to it, me and my sister, as CEOs. And I think also it's that everyone needs to know this is something that's non-negotiable. Yes, we have got a commercial agenda and the commercial pathway that we want to hit. We need to grow as a business. We need to be profitable as a business, because otherwise we can't do anything. But this is something that's non-negotiable. We recognise it's going to be expensive, and that there will be a short-term profit hit, but that's okay. We're building a brand for the long term, and it's going to be difficult. So as long as everyone knows all of those sort of things, it's okay. So we're very fortunate that as a slightly larger business, we have a director of sustainability, and we also have another person working pretty much full time on it. So we've got quite a lot of resource, and they're very tapped into all the usual stuff, listening to podcasts, reading books and stuff. So they're very, very knowledgeable themselves. But in addition to that, as I said before, we've done some very important work with the Carbon Trust, who've helped us set the science-based targets for 2025. We've worked with a particular consultant called Gavin Knight from Green Knights, and he's been helping us with Scope 3, which we haven't even talked about at the moment, which is incredibly complicated, particularly as a food business. I think that, as my technical director just said to me, there is a lot of smoke and mirrors out there in the whole Scope 3 world, and so you need to take a very pragmatic approach and prioritise accordingly, because it's complicated. We are also members of the Food Ethics Council that has provided guidance as well. So I think getting involved in the industry type space, that also helps. You've got to lean into it. You've got to read. You've got to learn. Just recently actually, the best book I've read on this is the Bill Gates book. And I can't recommend it highly enough, because to a slightly numerate mind like mine, it sort of breaks down the problem really, really well. And it helped me to understand my own business's problems by looking at it on a macro scale. So read, learn, lean into it, accept it's difficult, accept you're going to have some difficult conversations, and start early. We started too late. And as a consequence of us starting too late, the problem's even bigger.